Good afternoon, everybody. Hope everybody's doing well. Robin from Alpine Ontario here, if you don't know me, but I think most of you have been tuning into these webinars, so you guys know me by now. That's for certain. Hope everybody's doing well. Just gonna let a few more people in here, and then we'll get this kicked off.
Hi, Robin.
Who was that? Is that Mitch?
It was.
How are you, sir?
Good, thanks. How are you doing?
I'm good.
Excellent. Why's my camera not working? Oh, that's why.
Well, you want to show me your face, do you?
Yeah, there we go.
While we're waiting, guys, I know a lot of you are here for coach credits. So you can drop your name into the chat for me, and we're still working on getting all of the credits from the spring and the fall sessions uploaded, but I assure you I will make sure you guys all get credited for this. As most of you have been trying to get registered on the new CSC database, you know the challenges and backlog they're having. But I promise you it will get better. So we appreciate your patience. But
You know what? I've actually had no problems with that. It's been really smooth. And actually, to be honest with you, I've signed up for like 6 online courses, of which one I'm starting at 5 till 10 o'clock tonight. And it was really smooth. Like it's way better than I think it's been way better than past years.
Great news.
Yeah.
Pass that info on to them.
And
Yeah.
that's NCCP or what?
Yeah, so ACA, the Canadian Ski Coach database, just got flipped over to SnowReg, Peter, which is Interpodia. So you and I have spoken many times about this.
Yeah, let's not get started there.
Well, we won't start that conversation here, but it's been a bit of a learning curve because a lot of data from the old over to the new. And of course,
and what a push acceleration, right? With COVID, that's all
sure.
That online course stuff has just gone from like 0 to 100.
For sure. So it's been interesting, but a learning curve for everybody. But that's good to hear, Mitch. It's gone okay. So appreciate you guys checking in today. And as always, these sessions are just meant to engage the community, bring everyone together when we otherwise can't. So these we're going to help replace what would normally be our fall coaching conference and what was last year Kickstart at Mount St. Louis. So the process we've been going through with these sessions has been about an hour. So there'll be some opportunity for questions. You can always drop your questions in the chat, or you can put your hand up and I can unmute you. But we'll just ask that everyone keep themselves muted. And when Peter gets going, if the quality of the session is going downhill a little bit, just shut off your video for us. That would be great. So I'll introduce Peter in a second, but next week we're going to have Molly Herford speak to us, and she's going to talk to us about building the all-around athlete. Peter's going to talk to us today about what his experiences and takeaways this past season as a cycling coach when there hasn't been a lot of competition on the radar. But Molly will talk to us next week about some other aspects of creating great athletes. And then the week after that, we're going to have a jury workshop, which is going to be run by some of our top officials, but I think is super relevant to coaches, especially those that haven't been on juries before. That need a little bit more experience and knowledge from some of our mentors in regard to how a jury works. And then we're going to roll into some course setting and some specific content on teaching children in December. So you can watch out for some of those. So I'm going to stop talking, but I'm just going to quickly introduce Peter. So Peter Glassford, I brought in. I'm really excited to learn from other sports, especially since COVID, and what specifically other sports have been doing to alter their programming, and some learnings that we can take away for our upcoming season. We know it's coming up fast. We heard from soccer a few weeks ago. So Peter is mainly from the cycling endurance world. He's a registered kinesiologist and chartered professional endurance coach, and co-owns and operates the Consummate Athlete, which produces podcasts, books, coaching, private clients, as well as clinics, and a lot more. So you can check out his website. He's got a nice little backdrop there behind him. So you can jump on there and check out more. He works with a lot of private clients, but also with the Ontario Cycling Association and some of their high performance camps and projects all over the world. So he's got a lot of great experience and a pretty accomplished athlete himself in the endurance world. So I think we've got a lot of great information that Peter can relay over to us in the alpine ski world. So I'll let him take it away.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you for having me out today. I just wanted to confirm, I'm getting a bit of an echo there. So just make sure we have everything muted. That seems better now. Is everyone good? We get some waves that everyone's in good shape, some thumbs, good. Awesome. So I am Peter Glassford, and I am a cycling coach. Largely, that's what I do. I work with mostly mountain bikers. And I do work a lot with adult endurance athletes in my own private business, but I consult a fair bit, and increasingly so with this year, especially with Ontario Cycling, the National Cycling Canada, and then clubs and teams and shops and so forth as well with more youth sports. So I am quite familiar with the LTAD and the pathway and development and races and all this sort of stuff. And I'm also familiar with Ontario Cycling and groups like Alpine Ontario, right, where we're relying on these organizations to guide us through times like this, things like COVID and hopefully more through our race seasons and stuff, right? So definitely very thankful for associations and try and help them out where I can, because I have, they're guiding us through that. So I want to thank Alpine Ontario for having me today and sort of helping us with these webinars, with these sharing sessions, with these educational sessions, and for helping us as we navigate through race seasons and training seasons and so forth. So with that said, I wanted to tell sort of a story of my spring. Our spring is in some ways similar to a lot of you. I imagine you guys are away at glacier camps, you're away at pre-season camps, you're maybe just doing dryland training, in Collingwood, in Ontario, wherever you're based. Similarly in cycling, we have often these pre-season camps where we take athletes to different places. We've done, North Carolina, we've done California. This past year, I was very fortunate to spend February and a bunch of March in Girona, Spain, which is, as far as cycling places go, this is where all the pro tour riders have always been going. All the names from cycling, maybe a few of the ones you want to forget from the past, have gone to Girona. You can see it in the background on my left there, the old town. Now the kids are sort of hamming up in a photo when they could be more than 6 feet together. And Girona is just this old, beautiful town, cobbled streets, and these really, the stairways are really narrow to get up. You're carrying bikes up through these tiny little apartments, and so it's just an amazing place to be cycling. It's an amazing place to be a cycling coach, and professionally, I've been doing this for 20 years. I have been coaching bike skills for 20 years. I've had my own business for 15 years, and as far as progressing my career, we're away in Girona, this awesome city. I'm working with, some of the best provincial athletes. We're having some of the Olympians and the national team athletes rotating through. So I'm coaching every day. I'm riding my bike every day. And, I'm looking towards the season of 2020. My wife and I had just sort of collaborated and changed, and got this, our business name sort of like rechanged. We sort of combined everything into this consummate athlete idea, lots of big plans for clinics and camps. And when we got back in 2020, so things were going really well. I was really set for this sort of personal best year in my coaching that had sort of been 20 years in the making here. Right. I was pretty excited for it. And so as you probably see, this is where this is going. By the time we got to about mid-March, things started heating up a little bit in Barcelona, is maybe an understatement. They were about a month ahead of us in Ontario. And, we're luckily we got the athletes, home pretty much before things started getting even that crazy or concerned in March. It wasn't really on their radar as they left. And so we got them home safe, which is like a big thing. It's much better to be dealing with these situations without the athletes and so forth. That makes you feel better. But we stayed a little longer and ended up being like right in the heat of the sort of coronavirus lockdowns in Barcelona. So they were shutting down our hotel and they kicked us out. They sent us to the airport. My wife and I and Molly, who was there coaching, we ended up spending 36 hours in an airport. And all these flights are getting canceled. If you can picture like Home Alone or some sort of travel movie where all the flights are getting canceled and turning red. And then we finally get on a plane, and I'm like in tears because I'm just so scared. You know, as a Canadian, you're not used to this idea that like your freedom's going to be challenged or you're not going to have a place to stay, right? You know, and very quickly it's just, we're sitting in all these things that are important in life. This existential dilemma is coming down on us as we're waiting for this plane to hopefully take off. And of course it took, you know, 30 minutes, 40 minutes, 60 minutes. No, you know, the pilot's not even telling us what's going on. And then finally the plane starts moving and we're taking off, right? And I just have visions of, I don't know if you know Will Smith in like Independence Day or one of these movies where like an asteroid's exploding behind him as, you know, the plane's taking off. This is the visions as I'm just bawling my eyes out. So not nearly as tough as Will Smith would be, but, you know, I'm relieving. And so we're over the ocean. We're going home. We're going back to North America. And it occurs to me that, you know, all these plans we had and all these races we had, you know, planned to go to were not happening. Right? All these things were not happening. And it came to me in a very existential sort of like, what is the meaning of being a coach? Like, what is a coach if there is no races? You know, this is everything I do is around training people for goals related to cycling races. And so I tell you this story and leave you with this idea of me sort of having this existential crisis over the ocean as we fly back to North America. Because this is ultimately where we're all at, is what is the role of the coach without races, right? Or with modified races. You know, we're hoping that your guys' season is going to be a little bit better than ours as far as races. You're going to have maybe something more, right? We ultimately, for all purposes, we didn't have much. But we asked this question of like, what is the role of the coach? And I thought what we might do to start things off is maybe brainstorm, you know, not necessarily skiing specific things, but I see everyone's using the chat. So we found that. So this is often the barrier on Zoom presentations. But I'm wondering, you know, think about things that you do as a coach. And it could be little tiny things like, you know, driving the kids to the ski resort or setting up the race course. And I'd love if we just start putting those things. I can see Jeff Hall's name. You know, what are some of the roles that you have? What are the jobs, the skills, the tasks? And I just want to do a quick brainstorm of things that you do. You know, this might be registration. This might be, I mentioned in Girona, we had these narrow staircases. So I had to carry like 100-pound bike bags. So I had to be really strong and lift things. You know, we're doing, taking payments. That's awesome. So you have to deal with money, right? So we have to deal with money, registrations. I see setting schedules. That's a good one. I didn't actually think about that one. So that's good. There's a lot of admin work we have to do, right? Different types of coaches are out there. You know, there's the skill coaches. There's the coaches who are more mechanically minded. We have equipment management. It's going to be important this year, and I'll get to that. For you guys, you have maybe waxing, you know, is something you do. It's very important, I imagine, to going quickly on snow. Waivers, so legal concerns, especially with COVID, you know, there's going to be some headaches figuring out, you know, thank you to Alpine Ontario, probably is going to figure out some waivers for us. Parent conversations, you know, one of my least favorite things. So kudos to all those people who handle the parent communications. Simple communications to everyone involved, right? And that's going to be super important this year as well. So that skill, anyone who's got the communication skills, going to be very important. You guys are amazing. Videographer, you know, increasingly with skill work, you know, we're using video, and I think with Zoom and stuff this year, that's going to be a big skill that we want to hang on to. We have team management. I've put up some cheats there as we move forward here. You know, we have things like counselor, some sports psychology. You know, it's going to be important this year that you're talking to them. I also have the word friend there. I think that's important this year, but a lot of you do a good job of that. Computers, you know, somehow I got on to Zoom here, which is amazing. A lot of you are probably very good at Zoom because of work, and Zoom's going to be important. But there's lots of different types of technology. You know, some of you are Excel specialists, I bet, and use that in your organization and finances. Social media, for sure. Right? That's going to be a good one to have if we're promoting programs. Parents are going to be looking for those. Team Snap. Oh, this is getting right deep into that program, the management there. Other ones I have on there, cheerleaders, writers. We talked about communication, speaking, hopefully better than I do. And we have things like mechanics. Again, I really think that mechanic, the driver, you know, getting the kids to different places. So that's awesome. So we've brainstormed all these things. I'm not going to belabor this. You guys are smart people. This will be available if you want to just go and brainstorm on your own, all the different skills you have. And this is, I think, in work, some of you might be parents, right? So there's lots of these skills that we're going to use. And as I go through my examples today and sort of challenge you a little bit and present things that we did, I want you to think, you know, who are the people you know that have these skills, and what are the different skills you have from racing, from your normal programs that maybe we might apply as we go through this year. So what happened this year? I think it's worth just sort of a large scale, or, from, 10,000 foot view type thing of what happened in cycling. A lot of you are probably familiar. I know Robin rides bikes, and that's how we've connected. So I imagine a lot of you skiers are riding, right? You're doing summer sports. You maybe are running or hiking. So you probably experienced some of the shortages, right? This is my favorite bike store, the Trek store in Barrie. And they were just drilled. That's my bike in the foreground, not getting worked on. And they had no bikes, they had no parts, they had no time for service. You'd have to wait. So as far as someone spent more time on their bike this year, awesome. So you're gonna be fit. So we're going to have limited, restricted, you have to book. We had some trail systems, you had to book like an hour, and they had only so many people could appear, right? I think probably Robin was telling me that some of the ski resorts are limiting when you can have races. So I imagine you're going to have similar, only so many people on lifts, right? There's going to be limitations. There's going to be higher demands on your admin staff. We talked about the COVID waivers, right? So Alpine Ontario, just like Ontario Cycling, there's only so many people doing all these jobs, and there's a lot of stuff that they're having to push through. So we just have to, as coaches, I think, be the liaisons and be willing to pick up some of these places where we're going to have to do extra work. And certainly we saw that this year, having to do a bunch of extra tasks or learning mechanics or learning new skills, right? And that's a lot of the challenges that we have this year. I think the other thing that's more hopeful, I tried to separate it there on my slide, is we had a lot of new programs pop up. I'll talk about how those sort of developed and how I interacted with those and how those were beneficial and a really good thing this year. We had, a lot of these new athletes, maybe some of you who are telling me all about your bike adventures there and spending time in bike stores, maybe you're new cyclists, maybe you're new hikers. There's going to be a lot of skiers who are coming back to skiing. You're going to have hockey players who can't play hockey who are coming to skiing. So there's going to be a lot of new programs and new athletes, and that's going to be at all levels. I saw it in my adult athletes, and we had lots of kids, right from, tiny little kids on Strider bikes right up to athletes that could potentially enter into our development pool for the future years, right? That are just essentially new cyclists. So there's a lot of stuff there. And then I think the other thing, which will be true to different degrees, but the idea that, you're not having these families and these organizations traveling as much to Europe or at all to Europe, out west maybe isn't possible or is possible, but some families won't go. So you're going to have on the organizational level, the club level, and then the family level, the individual level, you're going to have some money, some time at least, that's not being spent on that stuff, right? Which is a big deal. Right. So what we saw this year was in Collingwood, where sort of our Collingwoods, everyone knows, I think, that we're Ontario skiing. So I guess you guys know Collingwood, was big for mountain biking. We went from 300 members in our mountain bike club to 600. Right. And this is just a recreational club. There's no racing. There's no competition. There's not really a lot. Right. And so these people are just people that usually would be in BC biking or in BC doing this or in Europe doing this. And they're just here, right? Like, it's not like a new bunch of 300 people. These are just people that aren't here. That's correct. Yeah, it's Cork. Yeah, you've heard of it. Maybe you joined it. We'd love to have you. So that's Collingwood Off-Road Cycling Club. But that's the idea, right? Is that these clubs, they might not be race clubs, but there's going to be a lot of new opportunity, whether you're a club, you're helping people with skills, maybe this is your instructor. Maybe you go back to teaching instruction at the ski hill, right? Like, people are going to have to learn how to ski. This could be adults. If you like working with adults, it could be kids. Now, before I get into my specific examples, I wanted to go, this is sort of a cup. Obviously, this is a coffee cup. And I've stole this idea of the cup analogy, the cup metaphor from Greg Lehman. Is a physiotherapist who works with people in chronic pain. And I think this idea of the cup metaphor is important, especially for us as as coaches, right? As coaches, we have a lot of tasks. We already list those, right? We have a lot of things going on in our lives, and we're often people that fill our cup right up to the brim, right? There's no room. I joke, we got this white carpet during COVID. And I always have my coffee cup. For some reason, I just did it, honestly, before this presentation. I just spilled a bunch of, it was like chocolate milk. It just like spilled everywhere, all over this white carpet. I don't know why we got white carpet. We also got a new puppy, which is another story. But So anyhow, I like to fill up my cup, and I imagine you as coaches are similar, right? You like to do a lot of stuff. You take a lot of stuff onto your shoulders, you fill your cup right up to the brim. And the worry we have is we don't want that metaphorical cup to overflow. That's when we get into, in this case, chronic pain, but it could be stress, it could be burnout, injury, just being fed up and not want to help anymore, right? And so as coaches, we want to make sure during COVID, as we pull back on travel and expenditures, and some of these programs maybe aren't happening, before you overcommit and do more stuff and open new programs and do more, it's okay. I've seen some coaches actually pull back a little bit and just take a chill year. Maybe you have family stuff you need to deal with, and that's okay. And I want us to think of this cup as having a little bit of slack, right? If you have white carpet like me, you don't need to be spilling on it constantly. So try and keep that cup with a little bit of slack in the system, a little bit of room for error, right? For the cup to move. I get asked about, training load a lot. As I talk a lot about this with different coaches and different programs, different athletes. During COVID and otherwise, that's sort of just an area that I work a lot, and just sort of how much should we train, how much of a certain element of training should we do. And I think if we look at the athletes with this cup analogy, it can also help inform some of our decisions this year. This is, again, sort of like a big framework. I just wanted to get in here today for you. The athletes are going to have maybe less travel stress, maybe less competition stress, but we obviously have like a COVID stress that's going to, be in that cup, right? And that's, without even talking about the school being different and all this other stuff they're doing, we want to just be careful assuming that because they're not racing or because they're not traveling, that we can just load them up with a ton of training stress. I think we want to keep, again, a little bit of slack in the system just so we can absorb the training that's there. So you might think about that as, rather than like a optimal effective dose or a maximal effective dose, we might be thinking more towards like a minimum effective dose of training, of competition, of race runs. You guys might track your training in like total vertical. There's a bunch of ways, right? And this is, again, it's sort of a nebulous metaphor here, but this idea that we want to be careful and talking to the athletes, again, it's more of an individual thing. Because different athletes will have different sized cups and different capacities and different stressors, right? Different home lives, different school lives. So we just want to make sure that we're thinking about this cup and making sure the athletes aren't right at their limit, right? We can save that on the limit for Olympic years. We can save that ahead of nationals, right? There's phases of the years we can hustle, but we want to be careful that we're observing that cup analogy. The other thing, the frameworks, we're looking for ideas here. And I've been going through the Alpine Ontario, the Alpine Canada websites, just trying to get an idea of what you guys have on hand. Where are we at with racing? And you actually have an amazing couple of websites there. I was telling Robin, I on Sundays, I always go through something. I go through like an older book or a new thing I found during the week. And I like to sort of just, catch up on things. It might be a course, it might be a book, whichever. And this is coming from the LTAD Alpine Canada. The websites are just at the bottom there if you haven't seen them. And I think this year is a great time to go back and just review some of these things that we already have and we've agreed on, and that are actually fairly well supported, right? This LTAD idea has been around. And if you're a new coach or even an older coach who's been very focused on racing, sometimes we forget some of these things that we said we were going to do with these athletes. I call them the teenage athletes, but this is your train to train sort of group. I imagine this is a lot of the group that maybe the coaches here are working with, but there's a level for all of them, and they're very great documents. I won't get you to read these, you certainly could, but the things that stick out to me here are the idea of sort of fundamental technique. They start competing seriously, but the primary focus during competition is on applying what they've learned in training and not winning at all costs. So this idea that the training is actually a pretty big part, right? As I go through, you can click on the explore if you're on the website. And you can actually learn more about this phase. And it's interesting, they talk about training should be 60% of the time. The main sport is only about 60% of the time. And free ski volume out of that sort of main sport is actually 40% of the time. Not that you need to know those numbers, but if you're wondering what you're going to do without racing, I would say that probably we can do a lot of just, skiing. It's in the LTAD. This is good. We've agreed that this is sort of part of the pathway, right? And this year we have a chance to ski a lot potentially, right? And ski in different disciplines. You'll see that sort of narrative as well. We should have our slalom skiers doing skier cross. We should be exploring different ways to be on skis, if not in different sports, right? That's certainly part of that training process. So I won't belabor the LTAD, but it is there for you to use. And if you're looking for ideas, you're going to take on a new role as a new club. You have a group of athletes that aren't racing as much or at all. I would get in there and really look at that LTAD document. I just actually found it this morning, but on Alpine Ontario, there's these skills and drills and thrills And there's some amazing little things there that, one pagers that guide you through things you should do with athletes as far as skills and drills and different games and things as well, right? So the last thing I'll mention here with LTAD is you'll see, and I love the word explore in that mountain in the bottom right of this slide, of this screenshot I've taken from the LTAD site. This idea of exploration and adventure has come up a lot in my talks this year. I've been talking with the strategic analyst for Cycling Canada, and he's looking very big picture at, how are we going from grassroots to Olympics? And we talked for over an hour. We actually had 2 big 2-hour talks, him and I. We just got along great. And this idea of exploration and adventure just keeps coming up, right? And I almost laughed. I did laugh to myself as I read through your LTAD, the word explore with this mountain in the bottom right. It's right there. Every single level, even your gold medal stages of the LTAD, the word explore is there. And I think they might have meant it that you can click on that to explore the LTAD further. But I think the word explore is important, right? How can we get these athletes thinking about skiing as fun and adventure, fun with friends? These are the words that we often use to describe our process as as coaches, right? Our job is to help the athletes become skiers for life, right? And I often look at that active for life, that idea of where are the athletes going? Some of them are going to gold medals for sure. But we're all going to retire from sport, right? The athletes are going to retire from our pathway. They're going to come out of that LTAD at some point. This might be your hockey players leaving at the fundamentals. They've come for 1 year and then they're leaving skiing. But we hope they have a really good year. If the COVID year, the 2020, 2021 season is the only year you have these hockey players skiing, we hope that that's a good year and maybe they come back, right? We hope that some of the athletes we have, they're not all winning. They can't possibly all win the gold medal, right? So some of them are going to become coaches. So can we give them, can we run some coaching programs for the athletes this year, right? Get some of your athletes started down the coaching process. Let them help in some of these, the instructions, the learn to ski programs, right? Some of the younger kids, let them see what coaching's all about. We did a little bit of this and they really enjoy it actually. Like it's funny. You wouldn't maybe think that the athletes want to be, but there'll certainly be a subset that gravitate that way. Certainly that's the way I went, right? We have some trail work being done here. This was with the local club. Kids love trail work. So you guys have courses to build, I imagine. You have jumps, you can build jumps, so get them in there. They might take a real big interest and be your next groomer operators, right? We need those, right? They might be the ones who are organizing races, right? So give them exposure to that. We saw a lot of our athletes getting the jobs for the first time, right? Again, when we're thinking about how we're going to have a smooth retirement, we need to be thinking what's after. And a lot of these development athletes, cycling and alpine skiing are very similar as far as demographics. They're not getting jobs. We're seeing this with the kids. They're not doing jobs because we're taking them to Girona, Spain for 7 weeks, a bunch of weeks, right? They're missing. They have racing all the time. And then they have school and all this stuff, right? So it makes sense maybe that they don't have jobs, but this year they might be able to get a job and then feel like they have a resume that's ready to go, right? So I think that's a good thing is what else goes into your sport. I have a random mechanical picture there, right? Someone mentioned waxing and ski techs and all this stuff, right? There's all sorts of things that go into the athletes' lives as athletes and then afterwards as well, right? That we might be able to help them with this year and build into our program. You'll find a lot of those things in the LTAD written, often like they should know how to wax their own skis. They should know how to, whichever, set up a course or these type of different things. We included that. Mechanics actually just got into our mountain bike one recently. I think the thing to ask yourself is often, why did you get into skiing? And then also, why did you stay in skiing, right? And sometimes that helps answer some of these questions of what should we do and generate some ideas. Another question this year that I found really helpful when designing programs for my athletes, and again, designing programs without an immediate goal, right? But what is the most important thing in your sport, right? I like to ask this to different coaches, especially coaches in different sports, right? Because it sort of helps you understand what's important to that coach and also what's important in that sport. You'll get different answers. We could have a great discussion in the Q&A afterwards about what's the most important thing in skiing, right? This could be a drill. This could be a skill. I'll give you an example. In mountain biking, I've pictured the start here, right? And you can see it was ski or cross coaches. This might be familiar, but you can see there's like 100 grown men in the start. And they all want to be the first to get the whole shot, right? And you guys are familiar with this, I think, from ski or cross. And so there's a lot of things that go into this. There's standing, there's selection of gears, there's timing, like a reaction time. We don't have gates, like you guys might have gates in ski or cross, but there's a skill to that. And it's not the entire, like we have a 90-minute race, there's one start. But it's very important. If it's like ski or cross, I imagine if you don't get out first, it's very hard to win. It's not impossible, but it's very hard, right? So you need to be able to start. But when I looked at our program, especially over the year, we weren't doing starts very often at all. In some cases, never. Like it would be like ahead of a race, maybe they'd do one, right? They were just, if you looked at the athletes programming, they're riding the road and not mountain biking a lot. And they weren't doing starts, right? And I'm just like head slap, like, why are we not doing the most important thing, right? It's not that hard to sprinkle this through, even on these adventure rides. You know, you can stop and start. There's traffic lights, there's stop signs, you know, and they're very short. They can be as intense as you make them. So I wonder, you know, can you ask yourself that, right? Like, are you including that stuff in a normal race season? Are you including the most important training aspect, right? And I don't know what it is. I'd love to hear, but that's a question I asked myself a lot this year, and actually has really changed some of the programs I've been doing for people. Virtual, you know, thank you for coming and being on Zoom today. You know, you're probably doing Zoom with work and school and everything else. You're probably sick of it. But it's a big part of our life. I think we're going to use this in different ways, even going forward, and, you know, whatever comes after COVID, we'll be using this. Let me tell you, you know, in cycling, we were very fortunate that ahead of this, there was sort of this boom in e-racing, you know, this Zwift is a software, but there's lots of different things where you can sort of race with an avatar. You can see the lady in the middle is indoors on a trainer watching her TV. And then the view on the left there is a Zwift screen, right? So you can do races and group rides. You can just do workouts on your own, but it's all from the comfort of your home, right? So very convenient during lockdown and inclement weather. And I don't know exactly how that translates to skiing. I don't know. You guys may have some sort of simulating software I'm not familiar with. It might be Zwift. It might be, you know, maybe you're meeting up and doing cycling as part of your conditioning, right? That could be possible too, depending on where we go with lockdowns and restrictions. But I think the more important thing with the virtual is, A, can you connect with the athletes face to face better? You know, we're not wearing masks. You can see my mouth and my expression. So maybe it's better than what you can do on the side of a freezing mountain when you have restricted time to actually ski. Right. So you might use that for someone mentioned video, right? You might do video one-on-one with an athlete as sort of a breakout session after your skiing, if your skiing time's limited. You guys won't be able to get into the resort, right? You won't be able to warm up. So the skiing time might be limited and short, right? And then you might not be able to hold on to the athletes because of weather. So you might use that virtual, that Zoom stuff to actually connect with the athletes a little more than you usually would, right? We could actually be watching video as you're watching my screen, right? You could be having a really good, in-depth, really valuable skill training session. My wife, Molly, who you'll hear from next week, I guess, she really went hard and like really helped the OCA out. You know, the OCA was ready and willing, but they needed people who could do stuff in this virtual environment. And so she, on the right, my right, she was leading yoga classes very soon into our COVID lockdown, you know, April and May. She also did a sponsorship course where she took the athletes through both like writing out a sponsorship resume and then also doing interviews, right? So sort of like a, you know, either that's a sponsorship, you know, interview or something like post-race interview. And these are, again, things that athletes will have to do, especially as they become more professional. But also I like it because it's life skills, right? This is writing a resume. This is doing an interview. This is talking to people, right? So what can we do in that virtual environment that can do it? You know, we had our support staffs, people like strength training people taking the athletes through some strength training. We had nutritionists, challenging them to go shopping, get some food, and then the next week they like cooked it or something for their family. They had to make a meal, and they did this virtually, right? This is very easy to do. And I imagine you guys have access to support staff too, or know a nutritionist or a chef or someone like this who could do these things. It doesn't have to be you. You have lots of great skills. You listed them for me, but this is the idea of what can we do virtually to augment, right? This is the new word is like blended curriculum, right? We have the in-person skiing, you know, hopefully that continues and you guys can do lots of that this year, but can you augment the program now that we don't have racing and travel with some of this virtual stuff? From there, I'm a kinesiologist. I like movement. I really like to think that movement's important and, you know, moving as an athlete's important. If I read the situation right, you know, Alpine maybe doesn't train as year round as cycling does. I could be wrong depending on the athletes, and we can talk about that too. But, you know, this year, what we saw is that we were able to get the athletes strength training and they were able to keep going through our summer because we weren't racing, right? So there's no reason to pull it out. And we were actually able to have a lot better, you know, they were able to keep training the strength training a bit more. And I think we're seeing better results because of that. For you, it may be that you have this competitive season that's not maybe going to be as competitive, and maybe you're able to get an actual training block in where you're seeing fitter athletes, healthier athletes, more athletic athletes who hopefully are able to absorb things like crashes. I always joke, cyclists, that we only put our arms at our keyboards and our handlebars. So our arms never go over our heads until we violently explode off of our bicycles and roll down the mountain. And then we end up with a rotator cuff injury or something, right? So I imagine skiers are similar, right? Your position is not much different than our cycling position in a lot of ways. Can we make our skiers, more resilient, stronger, so that when they do ski, they're more athletic, right? Some of the coaches are going and they found like gymnastics coaches and judo coaches, and they're working on actually falling and tumbling with our athletes, right? I think that's a great idea. A little out of the, this is weird. But when you think about the consistency of training, which is really the most important portion of our training, is that we want to train consistently. Some of that really makes sense. So thinking about that year round. For you guys, it might be, getting an indoor outdoor space like a horse barn or something, and maybe you can do strength training year round, and some of this dry land training that alpine skiing does so well. Maybe you can keep that going through the season and see what that does for your athletes, right? So that's maybe another way to sort of blend that into your programming. Okay, we're getting close here. The idea then of more time together. I have two more ideas. So this is the second last, and we've been able to spend a lot of time together this year, and it's been really good from a coaching perspective. I've been able to ride with athletes, smaller groups. So we're having better conversations, and this idea of adventure, we're getting out and actually riding for 3 and 4 hours and just talking, getting to know the athletes, versus riding like hamster wheel courses at race sites and really focused on times and, how they're riding individual obstacles. We're just riding, right? And that's how I got into cycling. That's how you develop skill, is all these different environments. The other piece with this riding together, that's Quentin DeSera, the guy in the red there on my right. And he's, not going to the Olympics this year. His brother's going to the Olympics, or was supposed to. But he's one of our national team athletes. So I imagine for you as well, you're going to have national team and Olympic caliber athletes around and available. Pull them in. Let them come and ski with the athletes, because they can see this similar other who's only a couple of years older, who came from the same area, they're not that much different. They're riding with them. They're keeping up, right? So try and think of how you can pull in those national team athletes and use that and be out skiing with them, right? And doing that together. The last thing, and I think the most rewarding thing for me as a senior coach, again, as you get 20 years in, you get a little jaded and stuck in your ways with things, right? And sometimes it's not fun anymore, right? And this year, I was very fortunate. A few of the, again, older road coaches who have been in it for a long time had programs that existed, but then their mountain bike programs, which didn't exist, just went from like 0 to 60 plus kids. And now they have 10 to 20, parent leaders who aren't necessarily certified, aren't necessarily the greatest mountain bikers or cyclists, but the program's there, the parents are showing up, they have a mountain bike program now. And so they reached out and they said, can you come down and work with our coaches, and then work with our athletes and just sort of help bump us up a level. Can you get our coaches a little more certified? In some cases, we did an actual NCCP coaching course. In some cases, it was just working on their skills and giving them a couple ideas for drills and games and such. And then I'd work with the athletes, right? And again, it's just, we're mostly playing. I tried to always pull them out of their normal area and go somewhere different so that the environment, so the context is different. It's maybe hillier, more technical, or just different. And just having fun, right? And working on fundamentals. I'm explaining in this picture just how you hold your bike for cyclocross actually to this athlete, right? So just very fundamental, like how you pick your bike up. But they enjoyed it, right? It was super fun, so much fun. And for me, going back and just, again, explaining these fundamentals to these athletes who are new and super keen, and having all these coaches who are just so open to knowledge was so enriching, right? So if you're a senior coach, think about how can I get out and share my knowledge and rejuvenate myself, rejuvenate my energy for the sport, for coaching. And if you're a newer coach, a newer administrator with a new blossoming program or a rejuvenated program, reach out and see. Again, just like our Olympic athletes, probably a lot of our Olympic coaches, our national coaches, our provincial coaches are around and maybe looking for work, if not looking for a way to be, to be helpful and be of use, right? And I always like that idea of being of use and helping, right? So to me, these were very enriching. And I think the value on those for time, one day of my time to then have 10 coaches with a greater understanding and then 60 athletes to be like really, hopefully a little better. I don't know if I'm that magical, but a little better. Was really good. So I think that idea of outreach is a big one, especially as you see these new programs come. All right, so final slide, and then we'll get into Q&A. So start thinking about those Q&As. This was a great year. You know, I left you with me over the top of the ocean in an existential dilemma. And I'll be honest, it was tough. You know, we came back, it was very rough, right? Having to cancel things, seeing races canceling. You know, no one liked change. And I'm probably one of the worst for not really liking to change and liking control of things. But I'll be honest, this year, through all the challenges and through all the things, like the amount of cool coaching courses and time with people, which is surprising, right? Because we sort of have been apart from people as much as I've been able to do some of these more smaller coaching courses and outdoor coaching courses. It's been an amazing year, right? And it's really helped me, you know, staying home's been good in Collingwood. And as I say, those local reach outs have been really good. So my challenge to you is to look at the challenges, to look at your skills. We outlined all those roles, and to think what opportunities you have without racing, right? What can you do as a coach without racing? We talked about the LTAD. We talked about those couple frameworks and things that you can contribute to that community, to your club. And I think that's my challenge to you, is to look at, you know, what do you have as far as roles, skills, availability this year? And where can you use that with the things that are presenting themselves to you? And it might not be clear right now. It certainly wasn't clear to me as I was over top of the ocean, right? And that's where you guys are right now, is sort of waiting to land into that season that's about to start. So with that, I'll say thank you. And yeah, if there's any sort of Q&As here, I don't know if any have come in or not. I've been trying to watch the chat, but that's that. Hopefully there's something of use there.
Thanks, Peter. That was really good. And I think just the greatest takeaway for me is to hear how, you know, you're staring down the barrel of something there's a lot of unknowns, and a lot of the coaches on this call probably are looking at that as a reality. But at least being able to task yourself with some of your ideas and thoughts about how to turn it around and do what's best for you as a coach and what's best for your athletes, by exploring some of the options you gave, I think are really great. And I think the one slide that struck me that I think is really relevant for our sport, there's going to be more time to just ski. And because we're going to be so limited at a lot of clubs when, you know, race training can occur, I think this is a great opportunity for athletes to ski with their families. You know, I don't think that's done enough, where kids are able to go and ski with their parents, because it is one of those family sports where the whole family usually skis, not always. But I think that's going to actually probably be a mandatory thing, staying within your cohort with your team, or, you know, staying with your family. So I think that's going to be one really cool thing to come out of this year as well, as more families skiing together. Which doesn't happen that often. But that was certainly one of my things that twigged when you pulled that slide up. But I'd love to hear from some of the coaches, you know, what they think in regard to one of the slides that Peter put up, the most important thing about skiing, and what sort of they're going to be focusing on this year. Peter brought up starts. He brought up just, you know, fitness. That's always something from a safety perspective we're always super keen to have as a priority, and it certainly could be. You know, if you're only allocated X amount of time on the hill, what sort of fitness dryland stuff can you do with the kids afterwards? What can you do outside, because you're not probably going to have access to inside space. There's also, you know, also talk of lift lines potentially being long. What can you do with your kids in lift lines out of the way while you're waiting to get up the hill? You know, I think there's going to be a lot of information sharing that's going to take place in the next couple of months across all of our clubs to figure out how to manage that type of thing. So I'd love to hear from anyone if they want to type anything into the chat or unmute themselves and share with us anything they're thinking about this year to combat the fact that we don't have a plethora of races to go to.
And I like, while everyone's thinking, oh, we have snowshoeing. I like that. Yeah.
Great idea. And I know some of the Sault Ste. Marie clubs in the past have they've always collaborated with the cross country ski groups up there, and they'll downhill ski, alpine train for a chunk of time, and they'll go out and ski 5K at the end of the day on the cross country skis.
Yeah, I didn't know if that was taboo or not, but that was going to be my suggestion. Was that
Yeah, I mean,
fairly accessible?
I think some of the coaches might think it's a taboo idea, but I think it's
Yeah, because it strikes me same as like in cycling, like we have the whole range from track cycling and BMX and trials and all this stuff, right? And you get the same thing where it's like a road cyclist would never go to BMX,
right,
but it would be the best thing for them
right.
in a lot of ways, right?
Yeah.
And I just wanted to bring up, like Andrew mentioned, his mountain biking, going to different locations actually was the best thing for his skills, right? And that's exactly it, right? As much as my whole job is teaching people bike skills, a lot of it is exposing people to that right context, that right constraint, that right environment, right? And when you're starting, it's not even right, it's just different, right? You just need to get a little bit, keep expanding that repertoire. And it's no different for kids, right? It's just they need to see different stuff.
Yeah, for sure. And I think a lot of our athletes will be, confine's the wrong word, but on property at their club for the most part. There's not going to be a lot of traveling around to explore other ski hills. But that doesn't mean that there can't be other areas of the property that are explored, as long as it's outside and you're able to stay active and stay safe. There's lots of opportunities of things that can be done. You don't necessarily have to have your skis on to do it. So lots of ways to be creative.
Peter, what do you like? My background's in technology, and I've been in technology for 30 years, and so I see a lot of you see a lot of stuff now, obviously in cycling, where you have a lot of virtual things like you look at Peloton, for example, right? Do you see that becoming more of a mainstream way of training for athletes during off season, and maybe even more so for coaches to keep interacting with their athletes during the off season? So now it becomes you're interacting 12 months of the year versus 5 or 6 that you would see during the winter.
Yeah, and that's what I was sort of meaning to. The younger athletes, maybe they do take a longer break, but cycling is traditionally like a full season sport, right? With our base training, I mean, some of it maybe is because of the aerobic requirements, but we go, season finishes say end of August, early September, and then if it's a one sport person, they're getting back training by October, November, right? So that's usually the way we go. And again, it's scaled to the age group, but that's certainly the idea, is we get them back. And it might not be in sport. I guess direct to your question is the idea of indoor trainers is not new. Like, we've been doing that forever. The virtual environment has certainly gone crazy. And I think a lot of the younger athletes really are using it a lot. And Cycling Canada is promoting like a weekly group ride and race. And I think we're actually sending a team to eSport Worlds this year, which is, I have zero tolerance for it. I just try and like accommodate as I can, but the younger athletes love it, right? And I tend to just default to them because they'll help others, right? So I tend to, again, this is something I don't like, but it's something that's coming. So I try and just get different athletes to help. I have a couple of masters who love it, so they'll help other clients and stuff too. So I guess to answer your question, yeah, it's a big deal. Whether it will replace the real world, I don't know, and I hope not, but.
Yeah, no, I don't think replace the real world. I think it's more in terms of using it as a tool, let's say, to stay connected with the sport, whether it's cycling or skiing from a strength and conditioning component, or even I think Dave Niswander had mentioned like being able to use it as a place where development of sports psychology, right? The mental aspect, because I don't think enough time is spent on that.
Yeah.
Particularly at the young ages. It's one thing to make the national ski team at 19 or 20 and okay, we're going to do sports psychology. Well, you've missed the boat. Like that, the brain's already hardwired by the time you're 14. So if you learn it in those younger ages, then you have the ability to be a better mental athlete. And that was seen with that one particular athlete or tennis player. I've forgotten her name, and she started doing sports psychology when she was 12. Right, you just become a better athlete. But anyways, I guess it's kind of deviating a little bit of what the question was, but really, getting to the point where being able to use virtual type of environments to help the athletes train and use it outside of being able to if you're not on snow all the time, you can develop the other aspects. And I just thought maybe you had some insight if you saw that being really, really key.
Yeah, I don't know if we're to the point where like right now it's sort of like immersive and helps people maybe ride more. Like you can certainly ride a trainer and stare at the wall. Like that's how I came through cycling, is just like, and you could maybe argue like that makes you mentally tough.
Yeah.
But I think we'll see, you know, that virtual technology is crazy. Some of the stuff, like you can ride, like simulate courses and all sorts of stuff, right? So for you guys, I imagine that idea of visualization and watching course video is already you're doing it.
There's a product that I'm looking at pretty heavily to kind of for the Collingwood area in the next year or so, and it's basically virtual skiing, and it's not the ramp stuff. It's more than that. It's simulating courses, and it's simulating trains and simulating G-forces and all that stuff, and that it's pretty cool. And so that's where I look at that, and I say, you know, that virtual type of training and that virtual type of experience, is it something that you see growing? And I from a technology perspective, I do. I'm just curious from your perspective. So
I think so. I don't know how much it'll do, but I think it'll certainly help for certain athletes. I see the idea of like sports psychology and preparing for race season, and that's definitely an area where some of these sports psychology skills could be introduced way earlier for kids. I mean, imagine you had sports psych skills in high school, right? Like that's, again, if we're thinking about life skills and things they're going to take away from skiing, like I know I use all the things I've learned from that perspective in life all the time.
yeah.
Right. And you can see it in kids if they don't have it, right? Like you're going to lose kids that could have probably been very successful if they could, you know, I see the deep breathing and relaxation and all this stuff, right? Like this is critical, right? Like this could be the difference. So when we're thinking about what is important for the athlete to stay in,
it's the mental toughness, right? And I was chatting with some people the other day. We're starting to watch the Masters, and you can see the golfers. Like, and I'm just, you know, switching sports here for a second, but from the mental aspect, you can look at these PGA golfers, and I played golf all my life, and you can see the ones that are mentally tough, right? And then you see the ones that aren't. Like you look at a Jordan Spieth, he's not, right? But then you look at a Brooks Koepka, or you look at the other guy there. Doesn't matter. We use Brooks Koepka. Guy's mentally tough. Nothing bothers him, and he will win. And he's obviously won. Same thing in skiing. As you get them younger, you get them smarter mentally younger, they're just going to be more powerful in terms of their thinking as they get older. And you can take those skills, as you said, and transfer it into regular life. You know, whether the athlete graduates and she becomes a businesswoman, and all of a sudden she's using those skills and being even better at what she does and handling stress and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
So I think that aspect's important as well.
Yeah. And I see another note here. I think it's Jeff maybe had it, of the idea of just being rushed, right? And I think that's a reoccurring thing we're seeing this year, is like everyone just felt like you're never catching up, right? And it's, again, coaches, their cups are full. But the race season comes so quick, and for you, I think that's where your sport, where it's like you don't get as much of that off-season training as maybe we do in cycling, where this year's maybe an opportunity to introduce these things in the virtual setting or in person or whatever you can do, the nutrition, the sports psych, the strength training, all this stuff that you want to do, and you would rather not be rushed into doing. The free skiing is another example, right? It's odd, right? Like the free skiing and the strength training and all this stuff makes us fit and makes us better. And then we don't have time for it, right? It's that same as that, what's the most important thing, right? It's odd. And I'm not challenging anyone on this or saying anyone's doing anything wrong, because we do the same thing, you know, and then we start teaching to the course, right? We go and we ride around in a hamster wheel, and they don't get any, you know, it's hard to, you're just getting one obstacle. You're not actually developing that athleticism. It's odd. I don't know the answer aside from right now we have time. So
yeah, I think that time is the opportunity, right? Which we just don't normally have. And that's certainly the trend with a lot of the comments people have made, is we just have more time. And in fact, you know, you might even look at time on snow and on task compared to other seasons. This year could be more than ever, because when kids are away for a ski race, it's such a short component of their day, and then they're done and they go home.
Travel and waiting and staging, right?
Yeah. So when you look at the amount of time, and that goes back to your comment at the beginning, you know, you don't want to overload the kids either. So you got to sort of mix it up, and not, you know, just be, you know, chairlift open to close every day, all day. Although some kids do that, but that focus stuff anyway. You know, you don't want to burn these kids out within the first month of January with all these really bold, grand plans of full days.
Yeah, and we had a few coaches, like they took that, they sort of just, big athletes, young athletes doing these huge rides, like bigger than I've done in my whole life. And I trained, I was racing World Cups and did the 1,000-hour year is always like the gold standard for us. And they're sending these like 14-year-old kids out on these 200K rides and stuff. And it's just, no, like their cups are overflowing, right? Like you're fire hosing their cup. There's no need to do that. Right. And if we think about motivation long-term and consistency long-term and, these young bodies like getting overuse injuries and stuff, right? It's just, we want to be careful, right? Like what do they need? What is the minimum effective dose? What's the most important thing?
Yeah. It's going to be interesting. There's no question, but I know there's a lot of programs exploring, what indoor spaces can we utilize in towns, where the ski hill's close to that we can use in the afternoons or use in the early mornings because we only have a small block we can actually utilize on the hill. So
I don't know if I mentioned, I'm going next weekend. There's this one club is getting a horse barn. I don't know if I mentioned this in the presentation or not, sort of in my notes, but it's like a semi indoor outdoor space. So it would be like sort of warm, especially if you're working. Right. And so they're going to do like bike skills in there, but it could definitely be, group dry land.
Yeah. I think, I know a lot of clubs are, getting heated tents and stuff like that, on property for, variety of different needs. But yeah, being creative with what you can continue to do outside is going to be a huge component of what coaches are capable of doing this year for sure. But lots of really great ideas in the chat of things that people want to try and work on. But mental preparation certainly seems to be one, and just having fun. That's another trend we see is just, and to your point too, Peter, we have a lot of clubs that are experiencing higher than normal registration numbers. Some are on the other end of the spectrum, but some are almost having to turn people away because they don't have enough coaches to keep up with the demand. So we are going to have a lot of new families potentially investing in our sport, and in order to keep them around, based on the fact that there's not going to be a lot of competition, field of play happening for some, keeping that fire lit is going to be really important. And at the end of the day, when your kid comes home and they didn't have fun, that's kind of the nail in the coffin. So, and gosh, kids need to have some fun these days.
Yeah, the social stuff and the fun. Yeah, I didn't, the games this year, in cycling, we can play like bike soccer and stuff. And I know in skiing, there's like skiing with one leg, and you could probably play soccer with one ski on or something too.
Yeah.
And I that's not me, like I'm way too serious, but the amount of, like, I work mostly with adults and they love it. And then it trickles right back down to the kids, that are, it's in their LTAD to play games a lot. You're starting kids, like everyone loves games. So it's like, don't hesitate to do those. And so many of those, like, again, soccer, like it's so much balance and braking and sprinting. And it's like all the things we're supposed to be working on in this game of soccer that everyone just loves. Like I was just blown away how many people just love that this year. Yeah.
And there is always that coach or two at each club that is really good at that stuff. So, I encourage people to on the call to pull from other coaches at their club that have expertise in certain things, and maybe you can parcel out your days that way as well. Like, Mitch, you can take, some of the kids for a period of time, Peter, you can take the kids for a period of time and execute what you're really good at, and share the load in that regard too, because I think
and I think, Robin, you're right. And as I've shared with you recently, what we're doing is to keep consistency in the training, because what's happening is obviously with the breaks in the course of a season for young developing athletes is that, we you've got them over, let's, for all intents and purposes, say it's a 6-month period, winter, but then it drops off, right? And so the path, the growth path goes like that, and then it stops and it goes down again, and then it starts again. Right. And so what we're trying to do is keep the consistency and keep the information flowing so that it's constantly growing.
Yeah.
So we take the time that it might take to develop an athlete and make it this way instead of extending it out too far. Right. Because you're dealing with age, You're dealing with education, wanting to go on to secondary education. You're dealing with seasons. Now we're dealing with COVID.
Yeah.
And that's not going to go away anytime soon. So now all of a sudden you've got all these different things, and it's just like this, but we want to have it be more like that. And so I think, that's part of why I asked about the virtual piece, because that's more towards the consistency and growth, and being able to open up avenues for these young athletes to grow in areas that they haven't been trained upon, like mental development, as Dave brought up, things like that. Like, that's so key. Proper conditioning and nutrition and strength conditioning, which can be done virtually. You see some of these things online now. And tracking that and being able to make sure that the growth and development of athletes is consistently always going upwards. And if it flattens out for whatever reason, then you can track it and find out why, and what do you have to change in order to keep it going back up again.
Yeah, there certainly is an opportunity from a tracking perspective. I mean, that's one thing that our sport doesn't do that well, when it comes to fitness, performance, and maturation, and how that sort of is all related. I think some coaches probably do a better job than others, but as a collaborative, we don't do it that well. So it's certainly something that this is another opportunity for collecting more data and continuing to collaborate on how our programming will be reflected as a result. So that's another opportunity that we as a PSO certainly considered this year. Not to add to coaches' plates, but because coaches are going to have a lot of interesting parts of their job this year that they haven't had before, like ensuring everyone's COVID attestations are done and everyone's got their masks and all that stuff. So I appreciate the upcoming season for a lot of you is probably looking maybe overwhelming, but I hope that Peter's session gave you some ideas and at least some thought-provoking stories that could potentially apply to what you guys are doing at your club all over wherever in the province you are. So thanks so much, Peter, for taking the time today and talking to our coaches. So this session's has been recorded, and we'll pop it up on the virtual page. And Peter's information is there on the screen. I'm sure you can reach out to him if you have any other questions. But I appreciate everyone tuning in tonight. I know 4 o'clock sometimes isn't ideal for everybody, but appreciate everyone taking the time. And does anyone have any other quick questions for Peter before we sign off? All right.
That's great. That's so cool to interact with everyone. If you have any mountain biking needs, you're keeping your kids going all year round, let me know. But yeah, it's been my pleasure. So please reach out anytime.
Awesome. Yeah, you never know. Peter could come out to some hills and do some snow bike riding with your kids. I don't know. There's an idea.
Yeah, we could do that for sure.
Some fat biking. All right.
Thanks, Peter.
Thanks so much, everybody.
Everyone.
Have a good night.
You too. Thanks, Rob.
Thanks so much, Peter.
Oh, my pleasure.